I'll tell you the moment it shifted because there's always a moment. Not a thunderclap, not a dramatic speech with a spotlight, just a bell over a door. It was a Tuesday after the high school let out early for teacher in service. The parking lot on Main was a line of mud-splashed pickups and one white Range Rover that didn't belong to this town. I stood on the sidewalk across from my own diner, Wits End Café, and tried to recognize it. New vinyl banner flapping in the wind, purple cursive Page's Place. My name gone. The hand-painted, since 1979 sign my husband stenciled the week after we bought the building gone. They'd polished the windows so hard the old decals were stripped clean. Even the chalkboard that used to announce Meatloaf Monday had been replaced by a backlit menu with prices that made me laugh, once the kind of laugh you make when you're too tired to choose between crying and swearing. I used to think this town would always know me even if I stumbled. Then I had the stroke. 2 weeks in rehab, too many, and a son-in-law with a smile you can hear through a closed door. I pushed the diner door open. The bell still sang the same two tired notes. The place smelled wrong, like lemon floor cleaner and burnt espresso instead of bacon and hot coffee. The pie case hummed, but there were protein bars where the pecan used to be. Somebody had tucked the old photographs, the ones of softball teams and prom kids and first communion dresses, into a crate by the bus station. They left the nail holes like freckles on the wall, so at least the wall remembered. I didn't make a scene. I never do. I walked to the counter like I had 100 other mornings back, when I knew how many red stools were going to wobble and which stubborn hinge would squeal if you didn't ease it with your hip. A girl I didn't recognize, silver eyeliner, chipped black nail polish, looked up from the register. "Counters for mobile pickup now," she said, polite in the way you are when you're following rules you didn't make. "Dining room's open, though." A soft voice from the corner, "Miss Carroll." I turned. Tyler, the busboy who started last summer because I slipped him a milkshake the day he got cut from JV, was standing with a stack of plates. His ears went pink. He set the plates down too fast, and one clinked. The silver eyeliner girl was already reaching for a menu. Already the new way of doing things, when the door to the office swung open, and Paige walked out with a clipboard like a scepter. "Welcome to Page's Place," she sang, all teeth. "Oh." She tilted her head the way people do when they're about to pretend they care. "Carol, didn't know you were coming by. How are we feeling?" We landed like a pebble in my shoe. "I came for coffee," I said, "same as always." She flicked a look over my shoulder, a little signal to Trent, the son-in-law, who was stationed by the espresso machine like a trophy barista. He wore that blue blazer he thinks makes him look like downtown Pittsburgh, and not a man who can't change a tire. "Of course," she said. "Let's get Carol one of our new blends." Tyler moved before she finished. He ducked behind the counter, opened the third shelf, the one no one but me and my husband ever used, and pulled out a chipped white mug with a hairline crack down the handle, Wits End, in faded blue letters. He didn't ask. He just set it in front of me with a little thunk like a kid planting a flag. Paige's smile tightened, then stretched again. "That mug doesn't meet our standards anymore," she said to him, still smiling at me. "Sanitation optics. You understand." "I'll wash it," Tyler said. His voice barely cleared his throat. "It's clean," I said. "I washed it myself 100 times. Paige pivoted to me so gentle it made my teeth hurt. "We've had to make some updates. Guests expect a cohesive brand now. You know how quickly things move." She patted the counter with 2 fingertips like she was burping a baby. Trent steamed milk like he was trying to drown it. "Babe," he said without looking at either of us, "the rep from Brewworks is on hold." "Babe," as if the whole room was a mirror. I glanced past them to the far wall. The corner where the veterans' photos always hung was naked drywall. Back when Randy, the one who lost his hearing in Desert Storm, came home, my husband put his picture up first, thumbtacks and prayer. We never let dust settle there. I looked at the blank space until the steam wand hissed, and I thought, this is how they do it. Not with a wrecking ball, with a Windex rag. "Sit wherever you like," Paige said, "already done with me. We'll comp your drink today." She floated away toward a table of women in quilted vests, real estate hair. A few regulars pretended not to see me. That's a kindness here, pretending. Small towns know how to look away when things are awkward. They will also remember your business forever. I slid into the booth under the window that faces the train tracks. If you sit there, you can feel the rumble before you hear the horn like a heartbeat outside your body. My husband used to say that was the only part of this town that could still make a person believe in schedules. I pressed my palm to the formica and thought about the night he and I pulled up linoleum with butter knives because we couldn't afford proper tools. How we stayed late enough the first winter to learn which pipes moan and which pipes roar when the temperature drops under 10. How the coffee tasted different on snow days, richer somehow, like steam knows when to carry a memory. Trent brought the coffee himself in a glossy white cup that could pass for a dentist's spit basin. He set it down the way you set down a bill at a table where you know the tip will be thin. "We've upgraded our beans," he said. "Third wave. Customers love the notes of..." "Burnt," I said, and he blinked like I'd thrown cold water. "I know this is an adjustment," he tried slipping into sales voice. "Your daughter told us you were focusing on your health. Paige and I, we stepped in because the community can't wait around. We had to make some calls. The brand needed..." Tyler appeared with a napkin like a shield. He set the chipped wit's end mug beside the new cup. Empty. Clean. Ready. He didn't look at either of us. Just wiped a ring of condensation I hadn't noticed. "Thanks, kid," I said. Paige's clipboard tapped the counter once. "Tyler, can you run the outdoor tables?" He vanished, apology stamped across the back of his neck. I took a sip. The coffee was bitter, the kind that thinks it's better than you. I set the fancy cup aside and pulled the chipped mug closer. I didn't fill it. I just held it the way you hold yourself at a funeral, careful not to break. Here's what I didn't say when my husband died. We had a folder we called in case. He was a paper man. He believed paper keeps a thing safe when people don't. It sat on the top shelf of my bedroom closet behind a shoebox of bingo markers. Inside were the deed, the original occupancy permit from 1979, and 3 letters he'd sent to the county about a historical designation after we found the old railway ledger under the floorboards. Names, dates, notes. Farmers paying for stew with fence repair, and pies with piano lessons, my favorite kind of math. He never finished the process. We thought we had time. That folder had a coffee ring on it from Hank Dawson, the county clerk, who used to take his break here and pretend it was coincidence. The ring stained the corner where my husband wrote, "Keep in neat block letters." I don't know why I thought of that sitting there with my empty mug and a cup of pretentious coffee. Maybe because the bell over the door chimed again and Hank himself walked in and he looked at the naked wall where the veterans should have been, and then at me. He touched the brim of his cap. Just a hello. But it felt like a flare in fog. Paige was quick. She slid in front of him with a menu and a smile. "We're doing seasonal toast flights now," she chirped. "Sourdough, rye multigrain." Hank's eyes flicked to my booth. He doesn't move fast anymore, but he moved steady, and that's a different kind of powerful. He set his cap on the counter, took the stool 2 down from my booth, and said loud enough for the lunch crowd to hear, "How's your place doing, Carol? Not this place, not Paige's place, your place." I didn't grin. That's not my style. But I felt the room reorganize itself by a hair just enough to matter. The women in the quilted vests glanced over the rims of their mason jars. Coach Donovan from the high school paused halfway to the door, his whistle hanging around his neck like a question mark. Somebody in the back muttered, "Didn't know she was back." Another said, "Thought she retired." The word floated, then fell. Paige's jaw ticked. "We're a team here," she said brightly. "Carol's been so supportive. Is that right?" Hank asked, eyes still on me, voice friendly as a porch swing. "I'm partial to the old meatloaf. They still serve it on Thursdays." Silence did what it always does. It told the truth first. Paige recovered, but the beat had already swung. "We've curated a new menu," she said. "Lighter. Elevated." Hank turned the glossy page like he was reading a court summons and set it down as if it might stain his hands. I took another sip of the burnt coffee, because sometimes you need the taste of wrong to remember what right is. "Guess I'll just come back Thursday," he said and slid off the stool. He touched the brim of his cap to me again on his way out. "Welcome home, Miss Carroll." Home. What a mean little word when someone's trying to rename it. Paige's smile didn't crack. "She's good," Trent whispered to her, and she whispered back, and the espresso machine screamed again. The bells sang. Teenagers yapped in a booth, peeking at me like I might start flipping tables. I didn't. I lined up the 2 cups, new and old, like a before and after picture, and felt something inside me quit begging. Here's the part I'll admit only once I was embarrassed. Not by them, by me. For believing that showing up would be enough. For thinking memory could anchor a sign to a wall. For trusting my daughter to put her hand on my back and say, "Absolutely not." She hadn't come. She'd texted a heart and a thumbs up and a promise to swing by later. Later has a way of being a weapon if you let it. Tyler drifted back with the water he pretended someone ordered. He set it down, leaned in like he was wiping crumbs, and whispered, "They boxed the photos. Storage room, back left, before they throw them out." I looked at the glass sweating onto the napkin. "Thank you," I said. He swallowed. "You taught me how to hold the spatula so the pancake flips clean," he blurted, then blushed at his own bravery. "Just didn't want you to think everybody forgot." Paige snapped her fingers. "Tyler." He stood up straight and vanished again. I pocketed the napkin with his fingerprint of kindness stamped across it. It went next to my folded discharge papers and a key that didn't work anymore. I finished none of the coffee and all of my thinking. Then I slid out of the booth, steadied myself with the table edge only a second, mind you, and walked to the door. The bells sang once more. Cold air came in like a fact. On the sidewalk, I paused. The train was late, the only reliable thing in town misbehaving. Across the street, the church bulletin board promised a spaghetti supper to benefit the marching band. A gust peeled the corner of that vinyl Page's Place banner and made it slap the brick like it was trying to crawl off. I didn't smile, but I did remember the folder on my top shelf and the coffee ring nobody bothered to wipe when it could have mattered. Paper keeps a thing safe when people don't. My husband said that, and I thought it was about taxes. Turns out it was about Tuesday. Stick around, this is just the start. If you've ever had to walk back into a room that used to be yours, I think you'll recognize what comes next. And hey, drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. There's an art to keeping your head down without bowing it. I learned that in the early years of the diner, back when a health inspector with a grudge came around every Friday for a month, hoping to find something wrong. We passed every time because I knew where to stand and what to let him see. Now I was using that same skill for a different kind of inspection. I started showing up at Page's Place 3 mornings a week. Not the busy breakfast rush, too many eyes, too much noise. I came in during that slow stretch after the school buses rolled out and before the early lunch crowd wandered in. Sat at the same booth by the train tracks, ordered something harmless, tea, maybe toast. The kind of order that didn't encourage conversation. I told myself I was there for the tea. I was there for the listening. Paige and Trent were busy people. They like to talk in half sentences and brand speak the kind that sounds harmless until you string it all together. Site visit, potential buyer, square footage upgrade, tax incentives. They never looked my way when they said it. They didn't have to. One morning, while they were fussing over an iPad by the espresso machine, I took a trip to the restroom and accidentally opened the wrong door. The storage room. It smelled like lemon cleaner and cardboard. Back in the far left corner, just like Tyler said, were the old photo crates. The veterans, the prom, dates the Christmas toy drive snapshots. Dust already gathering on the top one. On the highest shelf, tucked behind a box of bulk syrup, I spotted a manila envelope with my name in faded marker. Not Miss Carol, not Mom, just Carol Whitaker block letters. I didn't open it, not then, not yet. I wanted to see how much they thought I didn't know. Trent liked to play host when investors came to town. He wore the same blazer every time navy gold buttons smelled faintly of whatever cologne comes in a bottle shaped like a race car. The second week, I was visiting a tall man with slick hair and a city accent sat across from him at the counter. I caught the words buyout clause and closing before year's end. They didn't notice me at the corner booth pretending to read the penny saver, but I noticed the folder Trent slid across the counter. Glossy mock-ups. Not just a remodel, an entire rebrand. No wit's end history. No mention of my late husband. Not even since 1979. Just coming soon Main Street Brew and Brunch. I went home that afternoon and made a call I hadn't made in over a decade. Hank Dawson. Hank answered on the third ring. "You never call unless it's trouble," he said, but there was no judgment in it. I told him I'd been in the diner. That something wasn't right. He grunted. "You mean aside from the name change and the menu that reads like a wedding invite?" I asked him if he still had access to property filings. He laughed once. "Retirement just means the files are in my garage instead of my office." We met that evening at the VFW hall. He brought 2 manila folders and a thermos of coffee that tasted like it had been on the burner since noon. Inside the first folder was the deed my name clear as day. Inside the second was a property transfer form, unsigned, but with a note in the margin, POA Haley Morgan. Haley, my daughter, Trent's wife. The handwriting wasn't hers. Paige's loops gave her away. But the initials beside it, Haley's, in blue ink. "Looks like they're gearing up to claim you're unfit to manage the property," Hank said. "Medical grounds." That stroke gave them an angle. I stared at the page until the letters stopped swimming. I didn't confront Haley. Not yet. I wanted more than a fight. I wanted proof that didn't bend in the wind. So I kept going to the diner. Kept sipping that burnt coffee or tea if I didn't trust the pot. Kept watching. Tyler became my little ally without even realizing it. He'd refill my water and slip me scraps of overheard conversation Paige called the bank again. Something about bridge financing. Trent's meeting a surveyor Thursday. Every scrap fit into a picture I didn't like. They weren't just changing the diner. They were erasing it, carving out the heart, and selling the shell. One drizzly Wednesday, Paige was out showing property, and Trent was in the back on a call. Tyler was bussing tables, and the counter was empty except for my tea. I slid off the booth and walked to the storage room. The manila envelope with my name was still there. This time, I took it down. Inside, my original recipes typed and laminated. The framed Wits End logo my husband had drawn on napkin paper. A letter from the county tourism board dated 8 years ago about potential historic landmark eligibility. My husband had circled the phrase application pending. They'd kept it, not to honor it, but to keep it out of my hands. I put the letter in my purse, tucked the rest back in the envelope, and slid it behind the syrup again. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with the letter, a cup of real coffee, and my old address book. I found the number for the State Historical Society, and for the county zoning office, and for a lawyer whose card I'd kept after he helped me dispute a supplier contract 10 years ago. One by one, I made calls. One by one, I learned that a process my husband started was still alive on paper. Dormant, but alive. All it needed was someone to push it through. Someone whose name was still on the deed. The next morning at the diner, Paige smiled too wide and asked if I'd be coming to the Fall Festival ribbon cutting. "It'll mean a lot to the community to see you there," she said, as if she were inviting a mascot. I smiled right back. Wouldn't miss it. She didn't know my visits weren't about nostalgia. They were reconnaissance. And she sure didn't know that Hank and I had a meeting with the mayor 2 days before her big event. If you've ever had to sit in a room full of people who think you're done just to bide your time until the moment's right, you know how it feels. It's not patience. It's not passivity. It's loading a slingshot one pebble at a time. Stick around because the pebble's coming, and it's going to land where they least expect. Now I'm curious, what would you have done if you found that envelope? Would you have opened it sooner? Or waited like I did? If you've never been to our town's fall festival picture, this main street closed off from the post office to the grain co-op, a line of folding tables selling kettle corn crocheted pot holders, and maple fudge that's more sugar than syrup. The high school marching band shuffling in wool uniforms 2 sizes too big, playing Sweet Caroline until their cheeks turn the color of beets. And the ribbon cutting, always the ribbon cutting on the steps of whichever business has something new to show off. That year, it was Paige's place. I showed up 15 minutes before the ceremony. Not early enough to linger, not late enough to be fashionably disruptive. The crowd had gathered locals curious out-of-towners, a photographer from the county paper. Paige stood in the center, all wrapped up in a cranberry-colored coat with gold buttons, holding a pair of novelty scissors that looked like they belonged in a kindergarten art bin. Trent was beside her in his navy blazer phone, tucked into his palm like it was part of his anatomy. My daughter Haley was there too, wearing that brittle smile you put on when you're not sure which side of history you're standing on. I didn't come alone. Hank Dawson was at my side, cap pulled low, holding a folder under one arm. He didn't say much, he never does, but the weight of that folder was enough to keep my pulse steady. When Paige spotted me, her eyes flickered. Not a full flinch, she's too trained for that, but just enough that Trent noticed and leaned down to whisper something in her ear. She smoothed her hair and stepped forward. Carol, we're so glad you came. Everyone, this is the original owner of this building. She's here to help us celebrate this exciting new chapter for Main Street. The crowd clapped politely. A few people looked from her to me like they were trying to do math in their heads. The mayor took the microphone first, delivering his usual boilerplate about economic revitalization and keeping our downtown vibrant. He gestured to Paige and Trent like they'd built the brick themselves. I stood behind them silent, watching the wind catch the edge of that vinyl banner. When it was Paige's turn, she launched into her vision farm-to-table ingredients, upscale brunch destination dining for the whole county. She talked about new traditions and fresh beginnings. She never once said my husband's name. Or mine. And then it was time for the ribbon. The crowd leaned forward, phones raised. Paige lifted the scissors. That's when Hank stepped up, calm as Sunday morning. Before you cut that, he said loud enough to carry over the PA system, we've got an update from the county clerk's office. Every head turned. Paige froze scissors midair. Hank opened the folder, pulled out a single sheet of paper, and handed it to the mayor. This here's the finalized designation paperwork for 214 Main Street, what most of you know as Wits End Café. Filed originally in 2015, completed and approved as of last week. It's now an official historical community landmark. You could have heard the wind change. Paige blinked, still smiling, but her grip on the scissors tightened. Trent frowned. What does that mean exactly? It means Hank said this property cannot be sold, demolished, or significantly altered without approval from the Landmark Preservation Board, which happens to include me and Carol. The mayor, bless him, cleared his throat and said, that would make any pending sale or rebrand complicated. A murmur ran through the crowd. One of the veterans from the VFW called out, so the name stays. Hank glanced at me. The name stays. Paige tried to recover. We're still moving forward with our vision. That vision will have to align with landmark preservation guidelines, Hank said, and those include retaining original fixtures, menu heritage, and historic signage. I let the silence work a little before I spoke. I appreciate you all coming out, I said, stepping forward. Wits End has been part of this town for over 40 years. My husband and I built it to be a place where everyone was welcome. That hasn't changed. And now, thanks to this designation, it won't. It wasn't loud, but it was final. The photographer from the county paper caught the exact moment Paige's smile cracked just a hair. The scissors dipped. The ribbon stayed uncut. People started talking, neighbors, old customers, some clapping me on the shoulder, others giving Paige the kind of polite nod you save for someone who's just lost a hand at poker. Haley didn't move at first. She just stood there, hands clasped, eyes fixed somewhere in the middle distance. Then she stepped toward me, leaning in just enough to say, "You could have told me." "I could have," I said. But then it wouldn't have been a surprise. The crowd began to drift. The mayor made a quick exit. Hank handed me the folder and tipped his cap before disappearing into the throng like smoke. Paige and Trent stayed rooted on the steps, murmuring to each other, their shiny vision unraveling thread by thread in real time. On my way past them, I paused. "Nice coat," I said to Paige. "Cranberry suits you. Doesn't stain as bad when you spill coffee on it." She stared at me, not sure if it was an insult or a warning. It was both. If you've never had the satisfaction of watching someone's plan dissolve right in front of them, let me tell you, it's not about gloating. It's about standing in the exact spot they thought you'd never reach again, and knowing they can't move you without moving the ground itself. The rest of the festival blurred corn dogs, cider, polite chatter, but the air felt lighter. Not because the fight was over, but because the balance had shifted. They thought I was a relic. Turns out relics can be protected. Stick around, because if you think they gave up after that day, you don't know Paige and Trent. The real unraveling was still ahead. Now tell me, if you were standing there when Hank made that announcement, would you have clapped or just smiled to yourself? The thing about a public reveal is this: people remember it for about 3 days. Then the story either grows teeth or fades into gossip. Paige and Trent did their best to file it under just a misunderstanding. They told anyone who'd listen that they supported the landmark designation, that they were honored to be stewards of a community treasure. It might have worked if the chain café investor hadn't pulled out that same week. I heard about it from Tyler before I heard it from anyone else. He slid into my booth one morning, eyes darting toward the counter where Paige was trying to talk a supplier down on a late fee. "They canceled," he whispered. "Investor said the landmark thing made it too risky." Paige threw her phone at the wall in the office. I sipped my coffee slow. "That's so. Trent told her they could still make money with private events," he said. "But she told him—" He hesitated, grinning a little. "She told him this wasn't the kind of place brides wanted in their photos." He got real red in the face. By the end of that week, they'd taken down the big vinyl banner. The scaffolding for the modern facade was gone too. But the walls were still bare where my pictures used to hang. So one Tuesday before dawn, I showed up with a step stool, a box of nails, and the photo crates from storage. I didn't ask permission. By the time the first customers wandered in, the veterans were back on the wall. The Christmas toy drive photo had its corner taped again, and the picture of my husband flipping pancakes in a John Deere cap was right where it belonged, eye level across from the register. Paige walked in at 9. She stopped in the doorway, coffee in hand, staring at the walls like they'd grown vines overnight. "Historical guidelines," I said, not looking up from the hammer. "Authentic interior presentation?" She didn't argue, just turned and walked to the kitchen. Haley came by that afternoon. I half expected a lecture about working together or letting things settle. Instead, she slid into the booth across from me. "You made your point," she said. I stirred my tea. "That wasn't my point." Her jaw tightened. "You could have told me you were filing those papers." "I could have told you a lot of things." She didn't answer. Didn't look me in the eye either. The weeks after that were quieter, but not friendly quiet. Paige and Trent kept the place running, but the shine was gone. The menu drifted back toward the old one chicken fried steak meatloaf blueberry pancakes, because those were the plates that left the kitchen empty. I stayed out of their way. Most days, I came in early before they arrived. Wiped down counters, refilled sugar jars, set out the salt and pepper shakers the way my husband liked 2 turns from full so they wouldn't clog. Customers started asking me to pour their coffee again. One man, Ben from the hardware store, slid a 20 into the tip jar and said, "Feels like Wits End again." By late November, I'd taken back more than just the name. I brought back community night last Friday of every month, free dinner for anyone who walked through the door. My husband and I started it after the steel plant shut down, when folks were choosing between groceries and gas. The first one we hosted that fall, the place was packed. People brought pies, bread jars of jam. The high school choir showed up and sang carols by the counter. Paige didn't stay for the whole night. She lingered near the kitchen phone in hand eyes, scanning the crowd like she was looking for an exit. Trent didn't show at all. The Monday after Thanksgiving, I heard they'd put their house on the market. A for sale sign appeared in the yard by Wednesday. By mid-December, they were gone. No goodbye, no note. Just an empty spot in the staff schedule, and the faint smell of Paige's perfume still hanging in the office. Haley stayed in town for another month. She stopped by a few times, never for long. We didn't talk about Paige or Trent. Didn't talk about the documents. One afternoon, she stood in front of the photo wall, fingers brushing the edge of her father's picture. "You were right to protect it," she said. It wasn't an apology, but it wasn't nothing. Winter came hard that year. Snow piled high against the diner windows. The train ran slow brakes, squealing into the station. But inside the place was warm again. The regulars came back. The laughter came back. Even the jukebox, which had been out of order since Trent unplugged it, started playing again, old country tunes, scratchy but familiar. One night, as I was closing up, Tyler handed me a folded piece of paper. "Found it in the storage room," he said. It was a copy of my husband's original sketch for the diner sign, Wits End, in looping script, a little coffee cup steaming in the corner. Underneath, in his handwriting, "Don't sell the heartbeat." I taped it inside the pantry door. Somewhere I'd see it every morning. If you've ever had something taken from you, then handed back, only because the taker couldn't make it work, it's not about revenge. It's about knowing the thing is beating again in your hands exactly where it belongs. Stick around, because what happened next wasn't loud. It was quieter than that. And somehow, it changed everything. Tell me, would you have stayed to rebuild or walked away once you'd won? The first morning, without a trace of Paige's perfume in the air, I noticed it most in the office. The desk no longer smelled like that sugary floral she always sprayed when she was stressed. Just paper, wood polish, and coffee, real coffee, the kind that lingers in the walls after decades. I sat there for a while, not working, just listening. To the hum of the fridge in the kitchen, to the soft clink of spoons in the dish rack, to the rhythm this place has when no one is forcing it to be something it's not. January came. The snow on Main Street turned to that stubborn gray slush that lives in the gutters until April. The train was always late. Customers came in with boots crusted in salt, stomping the cold off before they slid into booths. And every morning I made my rounds, filling creamers, flipping chairs down, setting the mug with the faded Wits End letters at the corner of the counter where my husband always kept his. One morning, a young waitress named Emily, new to town, new to the diner, watched me set it down. "You ever think about selling?" she asked casual. I looked at that mug chipped along the handle, steam curling out of it. "You can't sell a heartbeat," I said. She didn't press. She didn't need to. It's funny how quickly the diner found its old rhythm again. Friday night, fish fries. Coach Donovan holding court in the corner booth after home games. The little kids running to the pie case to press their noses to the glass. And in between the quiet moments, I'd forgotten I loved pouring coffee for Mrs. Leland before she could ask. Seeing Hank's cap bob past the window and knowing he'd be in for the meatloaf special. Catching Tyler sneaking an extra slice of cornbread to the single mom at table 6 because she looked tired. Haley came by less often, but when she did, she lingered. She'd help bus tables refill the ketchup bottles without me asking. One afternoon, I found her standing at the pantry door staring at my husband's old sketch for the sign. She touched the corner of the paper like it was something fragile. "You really kept everything," she said. "I told you once paper keeps a thing safe when people don't," I said. This time she nodded, like maybe she understood. By February, I'd decided the diner wasn't just mine to run. It was mine to protect. With Hank's help, I filed the last of the conservation paperwork for the property, tying it not just to landmark status, but to a community foundation that would keep it open in some form long after I was gone. I didn't tell Haley until it was done. She read the documents at the counter quiet. Finally, she said, "So, even if I wanted to sell it, I couldn't." No one could, I said. She set the papers down, a strange smile on her face. Not happy, not angry. Just settled. Spring thaw came late that year. The snow melted in slow patches, revealing muddy grass and cigarette butts that had been hiding under the drifts. But the daffodils by the diner's front step pushed through anyway, stubborn little bursts of yellow against the gray. One Saturday morning, as I was refilling sugar jars, the door opened and a group of college kids came in back in town for spring break. They looked around, grinning. Still the same one of them said, "Should be," I told him. They took the booth by the jukebox and fed it quarters until Take It Easy came on. I wiped down the counter, and for a moment, I could almost see my husband leaning against the doorframe watching it all. That night, after closing, I stayed behind. No reason, really. Just didn't want to leave yet. I made a pot of coffee and poured it into that chipped mug. Sat in the booth by the train tracks, the one that rattles just a bit when the freight rolls through. I opened my old journal, one I'd stopped writing in after the stroke, and started a new page. I wrote about the day I came back to find my name gone from the building. About the folder in my closet. About Hank's voice at the ribbon cutting. But mostly, I wrote about what stayed. The walls. The stories. The heartbeat. It's not that I forgave Paige and Trent. Some things don't need forgiving, they need forgetting. But I did make peace with what they left behind, proof that I could still stand up, even if it wasn't loud, even if no one clapped. Because here's the thing, quiet doesn't mean weak. Quiet just means you're not done loading the slingshot yet. The last line I wrote in that journal that night was simple, "It's still mine, and it always will be." I closed the book, finished my coffee, and turned off the lights. If you've ever fought for something you built with your own hands and won it back, you know, it's not the victory that sticks with you. It's the mornings after. The normal days. The hum of a place that's yours again. So tell me, if someone tried to erase your name from your own story, how far would you go to write it back in?